You're looking at a 130,000-year-old Neanderthal skull, but that's not the disturbing part. Fragments of this skull have been removed, and those fragments were used as a tool. Neanderthals regularly sharpened their stone weapons on bone. Normally they used thick leg bones from deer, horses, and bison. They'd press flint edges against the dense bone, chipping off tiny flakes to make their blades razor sharp. But at several sites across Europe is where it gets disturbing. They didn't use animal bones, they used bones from their own kind. Neanderthal femurs, skull fragments, and to make matters even worse, every single one of those sites shows evidence of cannibalism. Cut marks where flesh was stripped away, bones cracked open for marrow. They ate them, then they used what was left as tools. But here's where it gets really strange. This is a bone flute, found in Slovenia, dated to 60,000 years ago. A cave bear femur with holes deliberately carved into it. The spacing matches a musical scale. Researchers built replicas, and they actually play music. The same species that turned their dead into sharpening tools also sat around fires making melodies. So who were Neanderthals really? Brutal cannibals? Or sophisticated artists? Or maybe both? For 300,000 years they survived. Then we showed up. Within 5,000 years, they were gone. Everywhere we went, they vanished. So here's the question. Who were the Neanderthals really? And how did we actually interact with them? A cave in England containing 3 skulls might help us answer that question. You're looking at 3 skulls, carefully carved into bowls, the tops sawed off, the bases smoothed down, but that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the marks, cut marks where lips had been meticulously removed, where cheeks had been sliced away, where tongues had been carved out and eyes gouged from their sockets. Gough's Cave, England, 14,700 years ago. The bones weren't just defleshed, they were cracked open for marrow, chewed by teeth, and scattered among them were animal bones with identical butchery marks. This wasn't starvation, as the cave was full of food. This was something else, a ritual, a celebration, or maybe just dinner. For decades, we looked at Neanderthals and saw the monsters, the primitive cousins who couldn't keep up, the evolutionary dead end that nature left behind. We found their bones with cut marks and breaks and said, look, they were cannibals. They ate each other. And we were right. They did. But here's what we didn't want to admit. Those skulls, the ones carved into drinking bowls, that wasn't Neanderthals. That was us. Homo sapiens. We carved our own dead. We cracked their bones. We chewed their flesh. And when our species met theirs 50,000 years ago, one of us walked away, the other disappeared completely. So here's the question nobody really wants to answer. What if in history, Neanderthals were the victims, and we were the evil that terrorized? Neanderthals weren't some shambling cave dwellers waiting to go extinct. For over 300,000 years, they dominated Europe and Asia. They survived ice ages that would have killed us. Volcanic eruptions, climate swings that turned forests into frozen tundra. They hunted woolly mammoths with stone-tipped spears. They were built for it. Males stood about 5 feet 5 inches and weighed 165 pounds, but they were dense, compact, powerful. Their bones were extraordinarily thick, strong as modern weightlifters. One-on-one in a wrestling match, a Neanderthal would destroy a modern human. And their brains, bigger than ours, about 1,600 cubic centimeters compared to our 1,400. They made tools, controlled fire, and cared for their injured. There's a skeleton from Iraq, Shanadar I, who lived to 35 to 45 years despite being partially blind, having a withered arm, and walking with a limp. Someone kept him alive. That's not a mindless brute, that's compassion. They thrived for 300,000 years. We've only been around that long ourselves, and most of that time we stayed in Africa. Neanderthals conquered an entire continent. Then we showed up, and within 5,000 years, they were gone. The timeline is damning. Around 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens pushed out of Africa in force, through the Middle East, into Europe and Asia, and everywhere we went, Neanderthals started disappearing. In Europe, we arrived around 45,000 to 47,000 years ago. By 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals were gone. It's the same story everywhere. We arrive, they disappear. For 300,000 years, Neanderthals survived everything nature could throw at them. Then we show up, and in the geological blink of an eye, they're extinct. That's not a coincidence. That's cause and effect. So what did we have that they didn't? Because physically, we were outmatched. They were stronger, better adapted to the cold. In a fight, hand to hand, they'd win. But we didn't fight hand to hand. Neanderthals hunted with thrusting spears, heavy weapons designed for stabbing at close range. It worked. They took down bison, reindeer, mammoths, but it was dangerous. Their skeletons are covered in healed fractures. One study compared their injury patterns to modern rodeo riders. They got hurt because they had to get close. Very close. We had something better. Distance. Arrowheads in southern France have been found dating back over 54,000 years ago from Homo sapiens, suggesting we had bows during that time. A hand-thrown spear is a commitment. An arrow is repeatable. You don't need to out-wrestle a Neanderthal. If you can cut him before he reaches you, then back away and do it again. Superior ranged weapons meant we could hunt more safely, more efficiently, and in any conflict over territory or resources, we had the advantage, because both species were capable of horrifying violence against their own kind. El Sidrón Cave, Spain, 49,000 years ago. At least 12 Neanderthals have been discovered. 3 adult males, 3 adult females, 5 children, and an infant. DNA showed they were close relatives, a family. Every bone showed butchery, cut marks, percussion fractures, long bones smashed for marrow, skulls cracked for brains, even bite marks. They were killed, dismembered, and eaten by other Neanderthals. And that wasn't the only cave. From Croatia to France, there is so much evidence that the Neanderthals were cannibals. But we're not innocent. Guff's Cave, those skull cups, those were us, Homo sapiens. 14,700 years ago, we carved our own dead into drinking bowls. Other sites in France, same thing. Skull cups, a cultural practice. Both species were willing to cannibalize their own kind. So if we could do that to our own people, what would we do to Neanderthals? Competitors, not quite human, but close enough to be disturbing. And we know they met, because we carry their DNA. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome and found something shocking. Everyone outside Africa carries about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. We interbred with them, probably starting around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago. There's a jawbone from Romania, OACE1, dated to 40,000 years ago. The man had 6 to 9% Neanderthal DNA. Genetic analysis shows he had a Neanderthal great-great-great-grandparent. 4 to 6 generations back. They lived side by side. They had children together. But here's where it gets strange. We carry Neanderthal DNA, but Neanderthals don't carry ours. Every Neanderthal genome sequenced shows close to 0 modern human DNA. One-way street. Their genes flowed into us. Ours didn't flow into them. Why? Because by the time any reverse gene flow could happen, there were no Neanderthals left. We don't have Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA. That's passed from mothers. We don't have Neanderthal Y chromosomes, the male lineage. What we do have suggests the interbreeding was biased. Most likely Neanderthal males mating with Homo sapiens females. The genetic evidence shows it wasn't equal. It wasn't a peaceful merging. It was absorption. We took some of their genes, and then they were gone. The interbreeding proves we met. It proves we could produce fertile offspring, but it doesn't prove we were friends. History is full of examples where conquering populations interbred with the people they displaced, and there's evidence it wasn't friendly. Shanidar Cave, Iraq, about 50,000 years ago. A Neanderthal male, 40 to 50 years old, found with a puncture wound in his left 9th rib. The injury had partially healed. He survived for weeks, maybe months, but it likely contributed to his death. In 2009, researchers did forensic analysis. They shot stone-tipped spears into pig carcasses using a calibrated crossbow to replicate different scenarios. Their conclusion? The wound was most consistent with a projectile weapon, a spear thrown from distance. We don't think Neanderthals had projectile weapons. Modern humans did. The researcher, Stephen Churchill, said it plainly. We think the best explanation for this injury is a projectile weapon, and given who had those and who didn't, that implies at least one act of interspecies aggression. One Neanderthal, one wound, one spear, 50,000 years ago. That's as close as we get to a murder weapon. It's not proof of genocide, but it's proof they fought. And in a fight between a species with ranged weapons and a species without, only one side wins. Saint-Césaire, France, 36,000 years ago. Another Neanderthal. Skull shows a healed scalp wound. Some think it's from a sharp implement. This Neanderthal lived when modern humans were already in France. We don't have a battlefield, we don't have mass graves, but we have these injuries, these hints, and we have the pattern. Wherever modern humans and Neanderthals overlapped, Neanderthals vanished shortly after, but maybe it wasn't violence. Around 40,000 years ago, the climate was brutal. There was even a massive volcanic eruption in Italy around 39,000 years ago. Volcanic winter. Maybe that's what killed them. Except Neanderthals survived multiple ice ages before this one. For 300,000 years, they were ice age specialists, and Homo sapiens survived the same climate. We were there, in the same places. If climate killed Neanderthals, why didn't it kill us? We were less adapted to cold. Climate might have stressed them, but it doesn't explain total extinction. Disease? Maybe we brought diseases from Africa, like Europeans bringing smallpox to the Americas. Disease could have devastated their numbers, but even after the worst plagues, some populations survive. Disease weakens, but disease alone doesn't cause complete extinction unless someone finishes the job. If disease was the main factor, we'd expect gradual collapse over a wide area. Instead, we see rapid, localized disappearances, region by region, right as we arrive. That doesn't fit a pandemic, that fits competition, conflict, peaceful assimilation. Maybe we just mated with them so much they disappeared as a distinct group. But if it was peaceful, large-scale mixing, we'd expect more Neanderthal DNA in us, not 2%. We'd expect some modern human DNA in late Neanderthals. We don't. We'd expect hybrid tool cultures. We don't. We see their stone tool culture disappear and ours replace it completely. That's not blending, that's replacement. Every alternative theory has problems, but there's one theory that fits every piece of evidence. We outcompeted them, and when necessary, we killed them. 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens pushed into Neanderthal territory. We had better weapons, larger social networks, more innovation. We hunted the same game, more efficiently. We occupied the same caves, more successfully. Neanderthal populations were already small, maybe tens of thousands across all of Europe and Asia. Isolated bands, small gene pools. When we arrived, we didn't need to hunt them to extinction. We just needed to take their resources, hunting grounds, water sources, shelter. Slowly, Neanderthal birth rates would drop, child mortality would rise, and when bands encountered each other at a kill site or a river, what happened? Maybe sometimes they traded, maybe sometimes they mated, but sometimes they fought, and we had the advantage. Superior numbers, superior weapons. Over a few thousand years, Neanderthal populations shrank, pushed into marginal territories, but we kept coming. And one by one, the last bands disappeared. By 40,000 years ago, there were no more Neanderthals, just us, and fragments of their DNA scattered through our genomes like ghosts. Here's the detail researchers can't shake. The pattern. It's too consistent, too fast. Neanderthals survived for 300,000 years, multiple ice ages, volcanic eruptions, then within just 5,000 years of our arrival, they're gone, everywhere. Every region follows the same script. Homo sapiens arrive, Neanderthal sites stop. Homo sapiens move into Neanderthal caves, sometimes with almost no gap. That's not climate, that's not disease, that's us. We found their bones with cut marks and said they were savages. But we did the same thing. We found their tools and said they were primitive, but they survived longer than we have. We found their DNA in us and said it proved we coexisted peacefully, but they're extinct and we're not. Maybe the Neanderthals weren't the monsters in this story. maybe we were, because when you strip away all the theories, you're left with one truth. For 300,000 years, Neanderthals thrived. We arrived, they disappeared. Everywhere we went, they vanished, and the only evidence they ever existed, a couple % of our DNA, fragments, echoes. The only Neanderthals that survived are the ones we absorbed. The rest, we erased them. We're the only human species left on Earth. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, Homo erectus. Every other type of human that ever lived is extinct, and the one thing they all have in common, they disappeared shortly after we arrived. So when you look in the mirror and see a little Neanderthal looking back, that 2% of ancient DNA, don't think of it as a love story. Think of it as evidence. Evidence of what we did. Evidence of what we're capable of. Because we didn't save them. We didn't coexist. We didn't share the world. We hunted them to extinction, and then we forgot. But we still have fragments of their weapons. Around 300,000 years ago, Neanderthals began crafting brutal and sophisticated weapons designed to kill. They hunted 6-ton woolly mammoths, and not from a distance like early humans with their atlatls and bows, but up close and personal, close enough to be crushed by a trunk or gored by a tusk. Their skeletons and fragments of their weapons tell us exactly how that went. The Schöningen spears found in Germany are nearly 2 meters long, perfectly balanced. They placed the tips of the spears in flames until the wood became hard as bone. This fire hardening turned simple wood into something that could punch through elephant hide. These were thrusting weapons, designed to be driven into flesh at arm's length. This is a Leringen spear, a 2.3 meter shaft found embedded between the ribs of an Ice Age elephant, proves these weapons worked. A Neanderthal drove that spear clean through hide, muscle and bone into a 6-ton animal's chest. Neanderthals mastered the Levallois technique, a method of preparing stone cores so a single strike would pop off a perfect razor-sharp spearhead. This wasn't random rock bashing, this was precision engineering that produced triangular flint points with edges sharp enough to slice through hide like a scalpel. But a sharp stone point is useless without a way to attach it to a spear shaft. So they invented the world's first glue by slow cooking birch bark until it oozed a sticky black tar. They used this adhesive to attach stone points onto wooden shafts, binding everything with sinew to create composite weapons that combined wood's flexibility with stone's cutting power. But it wasn't just spears they made. Stone hand axes weighing up to a kilogram could cave in skulls. Wooden clubs could shatter bones. They even used curved throwing sticks that could break a rabbit's spine at 15 meters and hurled rocks with bone-cracking force. But Neanderthals never developed true ranged weapons. No bows, no atlatls. Their shoulder joints were built for power, not speed. Perfect for ramming a spear into a mammoth's ribs, terrible for hurling it long distances. Chemical signatures in their bones reveal Neanderthals derived 80% of their diet from meat, a carnivore ratio matching Arctic wolves. They focused on the largest, most dangerous animals in Ice Age Europe: woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, wild horses, reindeer. At an archaeologist's site at La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey, archaeologists discovered massive piles of mammoth and woolly rhino bones at the base of a ravine. Neanderthals used the landscape as a weapon, driving herds into narrow gullies where animals became trapped. Once confined, small hunting parties could close in and attack from multiple angles. Their tactics relied on stealth and patience. They'd position themselves downwind, hiding near water sources or migration routes. When prey approached, they'd explode from cover, multiple hunters thrusting spears at the soft underbelly, neck, or between ribs. The goal was to puncture lungs or major blood vessels. A mammoth hunt required nerve. Multiple spears driven into soft tissue while avoiding the thrashing trunk and tusks that could crush a human in one swing. Woolly rhinos with poor eyesight would charge blindly, 2 tons of muscle behind a massive horn that could gore straight through a torso. Bison had horn spans wider than a man's outstretched arms. Even horses could kick with bone-breaking force. Every hunt put Neanderthals within range of deadly counterattacks, and their bones show how often hunts went wrong. An estimated 79 to 94% of adult Neanderthals suffered at least one major traumatic injury during their lives. Over a third had multiple severe injuries. Even teenage Neanderthals were getting broken on hunts. Researchers compared Neanderthal injury patterns to modern populations and found only one match: professional rodeo riders. Bull riders who get headbutted, thrown, and trampled. The distribution was nearly identical: heavy trauma to head and upper body. That's the signature of facing large thrashing animals at arm's length. Shanidar 1, found in Iraq, had a crushing blow to his skull that left him blind on one side. His right arm was withered and the lower portion completely missing. He had a healed collarbone fracture, advanced arthritis, a crippled foot, and was partially deaf. Despite all this, he lived to roughly 40 to 50 years old. His injuries had healed long before death, meaning he survived for decades as a blind, one-armed, limping man. His group fed him and protected him, and he was one of the lucky ones. He lived long enough for his group to care for him. Many didn't. About 80% of Neanderthals died before age 40. The injuries accumulated faster than bodies could heal. But their prey weren't the only things trying to kill them. Neanderthals lived in small, isolated bands, maybe 10 to 20 individuals scattered across vast territories. Resources were scarce. Competition for prime hunting grounds was brutal. Some skull injuries don't match hunting accidents. Depressed fractures on foreheads, circular dents in bone consistent with clubs swung directly at someone's head. Some healed, others show no healing. The blow killed them. At Krapina in Croatia and El Sidron in Spain, archaeologists found Neanderthal bones with cut marks from stone tools. Systematic butchery, bones stripped of meat, cracked open for marrow, identical to how they processed animal prey. Multiple individuals, including children, were killed and consumed. When hunts failed for weeks and children started starving, bands made a choice no one wanted to make. The cannibalism evidence from these sites tells a story of desperation, groups turning on their weakest members, or attacking rival bands, not for territory, but for food. It's the darkest indicator of how precarious their existence had become. When two groups met at a critical water source during lean times, violence was inevitable. Spears thrust at torsos, clubs swung at heads, hand axes driven into necks. Brutal, personal, deadly. Neanderthals faced violence from prey and from each other, but the deadliest threat was still coming. Around 45,000 to 40,000 years ago, modern humans pushed into Europe. Shanidar 3, found in the same cave as Shanidar 1, had a puncture wound in his rib that was partially healed when he died. Modern forensic analysis reveals a narrow hole that pierced between ribs, the wound from a projectile thrown from distance. The shape doesn't match thick Neanderthal spears. This came from something lighter, faster, launched from farther away. Some researchers believe this is the first murder between human species. A modern human striking a Neanderthal from 20 or 30 meters, a range where the Neanderthal couldn't defend himself. Shanidar 3 lived for weeks before infection killed him. He died slowly, unable to fight back against an enemy beyond his weapon's reach. Humans had atlatls that could launch spears 30 to 50 meters with lethal force. Later, bows that could kill at 100 meters. Imagine a Neanderthal hunting party encountering humans. Neanderthals would need to sprint within 10 meters to attack. Humans could start killing while Neanderthals were still 30 meters away, defenseless. It's hardly a fight, it's target practice. Where Neanderthals and humans overlapped geographically, Neanderthal populations collapsed within centuries. The timing is too consistent to be coincidence. Climate chaos around this same time made everything worse. Rapid swings between warming and freezing crashed prey populations just as a more efficient predator arrived. Megafauna herds that Neanderthals depended on migrated away or died off. The few that remained became battlegrounds between two human species, and only one had weapons that could strike from safety. Humans didn't just outcompete for food, Evidence suggests direct, violent displacement. Larger human groups with ranged weapons could kill Neanderthal hunters from distances they had no defense against. Small Neanderthal bands couldn't protect their territories. If they resisted, they died before getting close enough to use their weapons. Archaeological evidence shows Neanderthal populations retreating to isolated refuges in southern Spain and Gibraltar. Their numbers crashed. By 40,000 years ago, they were functionally extinct across most of Europe. By 35,000 years ago, completely gone. About 2% of non-African human DNA comes from Neanderthals, evidence of some interbreeding before the end. But as a distinct people, they were erased. The last Neanderthals died roughly 40,000 years ago, some killed by climate and starvation, some killed by prey in hunts gone wrong, some killed by each other in desperate fights over dwindling resources, and some, like Shanidar III with a projectile through his ribs, killed by humans they never saw coming. Their weapons were brutal and effective for 300,000 years. But in a world where violence came from every direction, the species that could kill from the farthest distance won. However, Neanderthals are not completely wiped out. There's a gene inside your DNA right now that increases diabetes risk by 50%, another one that makes your immune system attack your own body, another that nearly doubles your chance of having a stroke. These aren't random mutations or modern diseases. They're 50,000 years old, and we inherited them from a species that's been extinct for 40,000 years. If you're of European, Asian, or Native American descent, about 2% of your genome comes from Neanderthals, and a lot of that ancient code is quietly destroying your health. Around 50,000 years ago, when modern humans first pushed out of Africa into Europe and Asia, they encountered Neanderthals who'd been living there for hundreds of thousands of years, and instead of staying separate, they interbred multiple times across multiple regions. We don't know the circumstances, peaceful, violent, or somewhere between, but it happened enough that nearly everyone outside Africa carries Neanderthal DNA today. At first, this seemed like a brilliant evolutionary shortcut. Neanderthals had spent millennia adapting to harsh climates and local diseases. By interbreeding, humans got pre-tested survival genes without waiting for random mutations. It helped our ancestors spread across continents faster than evolution alone would allow. But genes that saved lives in the Ice Age are wrecking us in the modern world. Let's start with diabetes. A gene called SLC16A11 came directly from Neanderthals, and it's devastating. If you carry this gene variant, your diabetes risk jumps by up to 50%. This gene controls how your liver handles fatty acids. The Neanderthal version completely screws up your metabolism, spiking blood sugar levels. But strangely enough, Neanderthals didn't have diabetes. This gene did something completely different for them, but drop it into a modern human, eating processed foods and sitting at desks all day. Metabolic disaster. Then there's your immune system. Neanderthals gave us turbocharged immune genes, toll-like receptors that recognize germs incredibly fast. Great for fighting Ice Age infections. Terrible now, because those same genes make your immune system overreact to everything. Pollen, pet dander, dust, harmless triggers that send people into sneezing fits. If you suffer through spring allergies, blame your inner Neanderthal. Those hyperactive immune genes turn against you. Neanderthal DNA has been directly linked to Crohn's disease and lupus. About 25% of Europeans carry a variant that raises Crohn's risk. Another affecting 10% increases lupus risk. Your defense system, courtesy of Neanderthal genetics, is attacking your own body. Blood clotting is another nightmare. Neanderthals had a gene that made blood clot faster, useful when you're bleeding from a wound and need to seal it quickly. Not useful when that same gene causes strokes, heart attacks, and pulmonary embolisms in modern humans for no reason. We inherited a Stone Age band-aid that won't turn off. It even causes placental blood clots during pregnancy, risking both mother and baby. Your mental health isn't safe either. Neanderthal gene fragments connect to depression and mood disorders. One theory: these genes helped Neanderthals cope with long European winters by adjusting circadian rhythms for low sunlight. Today, that manifests as seasonal depression or anxiety. Your bad days might carry a 50,000-year-old signature, and it gets even worse. If you've struggled to quit smoking, Neanderthals might be responsible. A gene called SLC6A11 affects brain reward pathways. The Neanderthal version cranks up nicotine dependence. They never smoked tobacco. This gene had a different purpose. But when modern humans with this variant encountered cigarettes, much stronger addiction, your inability to quit might be archaic. And it gets weird because Neanderthal DNA doesn't just affect health, it affects how you look and act. Wake up naturally at dawn. That's likely Neanderthal genetics pushing your body clock toward early bird mode. Scientists think this helped them adapt to extreme seasonal daylight changes. If you're bouncing out of bed at 6 AM, thank your ancient ancestors. Your physical appearance is massively impacted also. Look at your nose. If it's broader than average, that might be Neanderthal influence. They had wide noses to warm frigid Ice Age air. A 2023 study linked specific Neanderthal variants to broader nasal shapes in modern Europeans and Asians. And your hair isn't safe either. Researchers found 15 Neanderthal variants associated with male pattern baldness. We inherited them, and now they're expressed as hair loss. Pain sensitivity traces back too. Some people carry 3 Neanderthal variants in a gene called SCN9A that make nerves more sensitive. Same stimulus, sharper pain. Now, do you sunburn easily or have any freckles? If so, blame Neanderthal genes again. One variant called BNC2 shows up in 70% of Europeans. If your fingers curl inward and won't straighten, Dupuytren's contracture, called Viking disease, 3 genetic markers came from Neanderthals. They left fingerprints everywhere, little DNA signatures reshaping our immune response, our faces, our daily habits. Now, to be fair, it wasn't all bad. Those aggressive immune genes that cause allergies today saved our ancestors from plagues. When modern humans hit Eurasia, they faced diseases they'd never encountered. Neanderthals had fought those pathogens for millennia. By interbreeding, we inherited their immune playbook, brutal responses that kept early humans alive. There's even a Neanderthal gene on chromosome 12 that protects against severe illness by boosting antiviral response. About 50% of people outside Africa carry it, and weirdly, nearly 1 in 3 European women carries a Neanderthal progesterone receptor gene that reduces miscarriage risk and stabilizes pregnancy. Women with this variant have fewer complications and more children on average. That gene spread because it helped babies survive. So there were trade-offs. In the Ice Age, those genes were lifesavers. Natural selection kept them because they worked. But we don't live in the Ice Age anymore. We live in a world of processed foods, sedentary lifestyles, and environmental triggers that didn't exist 50,000 years ago. Genes that once protected us now harm us. That's evolution's brutal irony. No plan, no foresight. Just whatever keeps you alive long enough to reproduce. What keeps you alive at 20 might kill you at 50. Here's the thing though, you can actually find out how much Neanderthal DNA you're carrying. Companies will scan your genome and tell you exactly which archaic variants you have. They'll show you hundreds of Neanderthal markers and compare you to others. Some people find out they're in the top 10% for Neanderthal ancestry. Others discover they have specific variants linked to traits like less back hair or being slightly taller. And collectively, humanity is still carrying a massive amount of Neanderthal genetics. Each person only has about 2%. But everyone has different fragments. If you could somehow combine all the Neanderthal DNA scattered across all living humans, you'd reconstruct about 40% of the entire Neanderthal genome. They're not really gone. They're distributed across billions of us, like a genetic jigsaw puzzle that will never be fully completed. So, was interbreeding with Neanderthals worth it? Did the survival advantages outweigh the diabetes, depression, blood clots, and autoimmune diseases we're dealing with now? Maybe back then, yes. Without those genes, early humans might not have survived Europe's winters and diseases. we might not exist. But in the modern world, the scales have shifted. That 2% of archaic DNA is a mixed blessing at best. For some people, it's a curse they didn't ask for. The strangest part, we're living with consequences of decisions made 50,000 years ago by people who had no idea what they were passing down. Every spring, sneeze. Every blood sugar spike. Every time you see that broad nose or thinning hair in the mirror, you're looking at an echo of the Ice Age. Neanderthals went extinct 40,000 years ago, but they never really disappeared. They're inside us, in our blood, our bones, our brains, a genetic ghost we can't shake. And that might have been humanity's worst mistake.